So my name is Nellie. For people that don't know me, I'm half English, half Egyptian. I actually have an African grandmother and an Irish grandfather. I grew up in Saudi Arabia in an all-girls school, which I loved, and I wish I was still amongst only women. And it was, and we had, no. And I was one of the most misbehaved students in the school. It was made worse by my mother being a teacher in the school and then being a head teacher. Now, I still, to this date, I'm not quite sure why I was so misbehaved at school, but the reason that I put it down to my mother, bless her, I think still trying to understand that maybe I'm a little bit, off the rocket, was that I didn't have the education that was very suited to my personality. I needed an education that was much more dynamic, maybe sport, maybe acting, but we had a very, very strict education. So I used to wear jeans under my long, horrible dress, glow-in-the-dark nail varnish because nobody could see it, and then rings on different parts trying to cover it up with bits of paper. As I then was 16, I went to England, and I was in a totally different education system where they told me to think, and I was, what? I'm used to memorizing. What am I supposed to think about? I was then in a mixed school, so discovered the land of men. And I lived with my grandmother, who was always really old, like 70 or 80, or seemed 100. And it made me start to think very much about how we learn and how we teach. And really, as educators, in very different ways that we educate, even with our own faculty and our own colleagues, it really is so difficult to think about in one classroom or in one meeting or in one team, how to adjust our different ways to different people. Like, how are you supposed to know that maybe somebody doesn't learn in that way, maybe has a little bit of ADHD, maybe has borderline. I'm also studying my third master's, don't ask me why, in psychology, because I'm very interested in cognitive psychology. And it made me start to think about things. And going back to my childhood, when I was 10, my mother put me on the local television station. I went to the TV station, and in front of me was a lady called Mario Grant, who lives in Ireland, who is now in an old people's home, and I go and see her every year. And she stood in front of me and she said, get up and dramatize something, say something. And I pulled my tongue out. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know, I don't want to be here. This is stupid. And over 4 or 5 years, me and my brother worked on a program called Children's Choice. It was a local TV program. And it taught me the difference between what's in your head and what you want to show people. And of course, as mostly adults we are, that's what we do every day. We're always acting, So life is not really a reality. And this brings me to a little exercise that we're going to do now. So I'd like you all to stand up, please. Right. Okay. And I'd like you to face the other person, please. Okay. So face somebody, anybody next to you, okay? Okay. Right. And I'd like you to pull a face at them as much as you can that is reflecting really, really what you are thinking at this moment. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. Now, okay, in one sentence, I would like you to say something to them that reflects who you would like to be in another life. Just in one sentence. And you can change your voice, you can change your accent, anything to reflect who or what, so it doesn't have to be a human, it could be an animal, you would be in another life. Okay. Okay. If you could all have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay. Can anyone share a thought? Can anyone share a thought of what they would like to be in another life, or maybe, you know, yes?
I'd like to be a chiropractor.
Why? For you to touch women and other people? Oh.
Why I'd like to be a chiropractor simply because I'd like to have my own body release itself, and basically the function of a chiropractor is that bridge to open up the energy for ourselves. So,
yes.
You know, versus, for example, medical care, doctors, so, okay.
Okay. All right. Sarcasm is one of my better points. Okay, chiropractor. So I think the point of that exercise is to basically think about in terms of your subconscious, what you would maybe like. So being a chiropractor is about relieving pain, right? So that shows some aspect of your value system. I would like to be some kind of animal. I'm not sure, and this will make sense in a minute. I'm not sure what kind of animal, but I would love to be an animal. Anyone else? Like, I can see that now, you know? Just, you know, you do the party and you're a football player. Okay. So, what is drama-based learning or drama-based pedagogy? So drama-based learning or drama-based pedagogy is used in all sorts of disciplines. So it's mostly used in the arts and humanities. But I thought a few years ago, and I'll talk to you about this more at the end, why don't I bring drama into the classroom? And I'll talk about this at the end so I can leave you with an exercise that maybe you can think about. But why don't we bring drama into a business school? Why don't we bring poetry into a business school? Why don't we bring dance? Because we're a business school and we have to wear suits and be really formal. A few years ago, I painted the corridor pink. And if anybody knows my dean, Dr. Sharif, he wasn't too bothered about it. It was more the people that do the painting that they had to come and paint all my wall pink again. And so when the associate dean called me at 10 o'clock at night, and he said, Nellie, have you painted the corridor pink? And I said, no, it's like an off-white. It's kind of like a little bit of a pink tint. And he said, why? And I said, hold on. We're always going on about innovation and creativity and being different. So why do we have all these boring corridors? Anyway, at that point, he said they're going to paint it white, you know. I've since had cats given birth in my office, a trampoline, fireworks, all sorts of things. The idea of drama and the idea of creativity, to me, is about addressing difficult conversations. So I just want you to take a few seconds to think about the difficulties and the challenges and really the uncomfortable scenes that we see across the world today. And how do we have those kinds of conversations with our colleagues, with our students, with ourselves, in a way that doesn't agonize our souls? So I teach business ethics. And of course, I have to teach ethics and explain to them where ethics comes from, how it came into business. And a few years ago, we didn't really talk about things like sexual harassment in the workplace. It was like, what? It just happens in the workplace? No, you know? We didn't talk about female genital mutilation in the workplace. This was like, no, this happens in like some governorates or some villages. In Egypt, by the way, in the governorates, we have 90% FGM. One of my workers' wives, I have a little building project with my dad. He came to work really late one day, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, oh, we just circumcised our daughter yesterday. I went, okay, right. And I have these conversations with him. He said, that's why I lost the day of work. And I said, so this is okay? And we had this conversation. I said, you know that this is not in Islam. This is completely against Islam. This is a culture, you know? So when we think about uncomfortable things that happen in society, this infiltrates into the workplace. Things like maternity leave, paternity leave, depression, anxiety, self-harm, bullying, war, you know? These are things that when I went to work last week, my colleague was crying because her auntie had been killed. So drama to me is about how we address difficult conversations, because as human beings, I think we can all agree that when we think about these difficult things, like, we don't want to have these difficult conversations. We don't want to think about these horrible things that are happening in the world. How many years did it take us to say, oh, there's something called climate change? Oh, hold on. Human beings are throwing stuff in the water, and they know it's killing wildlife, and they know it's killing the coral reef, but they're doing it anyway. Right? In Egypt, by the way, we have the problem of pollution and plastic in the waters as well. We have poverty. We have domestic abuse. We have all of these things that infiltrate into the workplace. Now, Shakespeare said, as you can see, all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players, etc. And I believe that that's true. We're all players. I'm more of a sociologist than anything, and I study identity theory, so we all wear different hats in different places, right? And I think as educators, more and more, I think now is the perfect time that we don't wear a hat. We just have these completely open conversations about things. You know, and Shakespeare obviously had all of these different kinds of stages of life, from being a baby to this kind of wise old man. I'm not sure if we're ever wise. Now, I want you to take a moment to think about what you're thinking about, which is a bit of a difficult or strange, like, what am I thinking about? And I became much more interested in thought when I started to study psychology and cognitive psychology. And really, what we see and perceive is really not what is going on in the cognitive structures in the brain. I don't know if anybody's watched Shutter Island with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's an awesome film. It has an awesome plot twist. And it shows how he went into a psychiatric institute, and it shows that, like, his wife killed the kids, but really he was in a complete psychosis because of what he'd experienced in his life. So, you know, as part of our culture in Egypt, as part of being Muslim, we're encouraged to be very, very reflective with prayer and meditation. I'm sure many, you know, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, the same. And kind of always reflect about what we're thinking. And I try and have this conversation with my students, and they're like, what? You're supposed to think about what we're thinking about? And what are you showing the world? So what version of yourself are you showing the world? And I'll come back to the drama point in a minute, and why. And as educators, are we really talking our minds? And this is something that I see with my colleagues, like, you know, now more and more, I don't know if anyone else does it. Like, so when I go to class and I've had a really bad night, I say to my students that I'm feeling a bit off today, or they like hearing about my adventures. Like, we need to be more real. And so as teaching, we're putting on a drama, right? We're acting, we're all acting. So why not act to reflect to reality? Why not talk about these uncomfortable things? And then what are we afraid of? And I think, so for example, I started teaching when I was 22 or 23. I'm now 38. And it was really weird because when I used to go to the bar after work or to the restaurant, I would have my students sitting next to me. Now it's not. Now I'm much older, it's not the case. So what are we afraid of in this case? Are we afraid of losing our job? Are we afraid of speaking about something that's not real? Are we afraid of giving an opinion that somebody might not agree with? And then surely as educators, like, we should be doing that. We should be making our students feel uncomfortable. And then how do we have these difficult conversations? So this is what the drama part is. And I'll talk to you more about this at the end. So how can we manage the narrative? So for example, in Egypt, most of my students are from a monoculture, but I have Coptics and I have Muslims and some various views, but not as much as, for example, when I used to teach in England. So how can we as educators or as colleagues, how can we manage the narrative? Because we all have different views. I mean, yesterday I was sitting at a table with people talking about, you know, the war that's going on. And I, you know, listened to various interesting perspectives. How can we manage that and reimagine the narrative to make a change? And I think somebody was talking about how do we see the waters with no pollution in or no plastic? And then how do we dramatize education to face reality? So why don't we get a group of students and say, think about what sexual harassment looks like in the workplace. Students, what, sexual harassment, you know? And once when I did that in class, one of the boys said, well, you know, this happens to women, it must happen to men as well. worst of sexual harassment happens to men as well. And he said, oh, okay. And then they dramatized it. And it helped them to feel less uncomfortable about things. You know, I mean, as an educator, and you're teaching sexual harassment, you're saying, oh, you know, a manager can do something to an employee and she has no rights, or there can be workplace physical sexual harassment. It's like, what? I might go to the workplace and that might happen. I want to show you a few images. So, in my free time, I'm an animal rights activist. It's been one of the, in fact, the most emotionally draining experiences of my life. And it's what I do all the time. I've learned to be almost an amateur vet. And I talk to my students about this, and I'll tell you why. 2.5 years ago, I was walking with my dogs, and one of the stray dogs with me started going into convulsions. I picked up a hose, put water into his mouth, tried to give him CPR, and he died. I felt like the worst person in the world because I couldn't help him. And I didn't know what strychnine poison was. I didn't understand anything about animal rights. I didn't know anything much about animals, even though I had my own. And I went to the local council, and I said to them, you've just killed my dog, and I've been poisoned as well. And they said, no, we don't do this. I said, hold on. 2 years ago, my other dog died, and I didn't know what it was. It's strychnine. And they lied to my face. So I said to them, you know what? I'm going to sleep on your floor. And they said, what? No, what are you talking about? I said, I'm just going to sleep over. Like, I'm just going to stay here until you stop the poison. And they said, like, who are you? And I said, like, I live here. You know, I'm a professor. And I'm just going to stay here. And they said, don't you have a life? I said, no, I'm going to camp out here. So they thought it was crazy. And obviously, because I'm foreign in Egypt, I look, you know, English. They thought this is the foreign, crazy girl that's, you know. But then I speak fluent Arabic. So my luck, the head of the local council was a friend of a professor at AUC, thank the Lord. And I went in, I started crying. I said, listen, yeah, I teach management. Like, where is your management? Where is your leadership? Like, you know, I said, like, I'm an activist. He said, what? I said, I wasn't an activist. I said, yeah, I'm an activist of today. I said, listen, if you don't stop this poison, I'm going to call the BBC. I was like, in fact, I'm going to call the Queen. Of course, I don't know who I don't have the Queen's number or the BBC. And he's like, what? I said, yeah, my mother's English and like she's related to the Queen. And he looked at me and said, like, you know, and he said, you know, like, who are you? And, you know, my dad was well known in the Marines, you know, and he said, like, okay, fine, we'll stop the poison. But what do you want us to do? I then spent 3 months studying about dogs, their production rate, what the problem was with people. They found 100 dogs there. The World Health Organization, rabies, like phobias, like everything. I was immersed in animal life to the point where I became like an animal anthropologist. I lived with them on the streets. I was a dog almost. But my point about this was to become an activist and then to teach my students. So this is what I do. This was a dog that had been tied up by a child, and I saved it. It was dying. The one in the middle is a dog that had been hit by a car, so I now understand about dog anatomy. And these are some puppies that had been hit by a car. My point is not because I'm in love with animals, it's because I'm in love with fixing problems, and animals is a major problem in Egypt. So in my class, we dramatized how to become an activist. What is something that you really disagree with in the world, and how can you act it out to fix it? So if you're thinking this, like, she's in the business school, what has dogs got to do with business? Mercedes-Benz just produced some wheels for a dog that had been paralyzed, and they've gone viral and increased their shares because why? It showed that Mercedes-Benz actually cared about souls. So this is an amazing example of what they did. We do that like in Egypt as well, but ours are not like Mercedes-Benz, obviously. I just want to show you some images. I'm not going to talk through all of them. This is what poverty looks like in Egypt. And again, we dramatize things like this and how we fix it. Because at the end of the day, somebody who was before me that was talking about the waters, it is corporate responsibility. We talk about corporate social responsibility and corporate activism. It is corporations' role to fix problems that they've hugely contributed to. There's a line of shops in Egypt of restaurants, and there's so many dogs there because they keep getting greedier and greedier, these companies, producing more and more meat, more waste, more dogs, more zootonic illnesses. So why aren't you doing anything? So I went to them and said, what's your problem? They said, like, it's not our problem with dogs are here, we want to kill them. I said, this, why don't you pay me and I will sterilize them? And it's 50, but like what? How are you going to do it? You're going to spray them? I said, no, I'm going to open them up and remove their ovaries and their womb. And then they started to get into a religious conversation with me. I said, listen, do you want to poison the dogs? And now you're talking to me about this? And I tell my students these stories. They sterilize them, they paid for them, good people. This is poverty. This is stuff that we talk about, obviously fraud and the Me Too movement, you know, wars, Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, Russia. So these are some uncomfortable things that are happening in the world. I'm going to go back to drama-based pedagogy now, because I want you all to spend 5 minutes dramatizing something. So this is where the inspiration was. That was me as a slightly overweight, quite overweight child, feeling very uncomfortable when Mrs. Grant said, imagine you're on a magical carpet to India that's flying. I was on the floor. I said, what? How am I supposed to imagine these things? And this is what I do with my students. So these are my students. This was a HR class, and I asked them to put together a script. And what they wrote about was pretty impressive. They wrote about sexual harassment, pregnancy in the workplace, stuff around LGBTQ, which is not discussed much in Egypt, but we discussed it. There was stuff about unethical firing, there was boycotting, there was stuff around religious groups in the workplace, terrorism, stuff that really we can't talk about face to face. And this is just a little example. So this is obviously dramatized. So this is a guy in the workplace that was having an affair with somebody at work. He was from a different socioeconomic class. His wife comes in with a fake baby. This woman basically says that, like, you know, I'm richer than you, I'm more powerful than you, I can have your husband. And they dramatize this kind of stuff because this stuff happens in the workplace. And they got some inspiration from a company called Redcon Construction that came in and talked about the real situations like that. They went to build stuff as well in certain areas in the governorates, and they found lots of things like sexual harassment, domestic violence as well, women coming to work in situations that they shouldn't have, people talking in derogatory ways in the workplace. So by dramatizing it, it helped them to kind of get out of their shell and talk about it. So before I put you into just groups and just put a little drama on for 5 minutes, I kind of just want to end with a little poem. Okay. Your eyes are bleeding with pain, almost as if the red rivers that are flowing from your open wounds are invisible to you. But we see it all. Our legs are like jelly as we scurry to your side and reach out for leaves, for sand, for rubble, for anything to save your little souls from drifting to the heavens. We hear our silent screams, but nobody else does. Can nobody see it as they walk by in their daily lives and watch from their rose-tinted screens? We failed. We are sorry. We fall to our knees as we watch you take your final breath, slowly leaving your broken, bleeding, and dismembered body, or as it was, a body, but no more. With our dirty hands, torn, blood-drenched clothes, scraped knees, we scream out, why did you do this? Do you not fear your Lord? You killed our innocent. We find solace in the sky as we feel the Lord above shining his warmth upon us, comforting our hearts with the promise that the oppressors only took their exterior and not their spirits. We hear him whispering, the souls will live on in my kingdom. I won't tell you what that's about, but you can all interpret it in your own way. But it was an experience that I went through that I wrote about. So this is kind of, we did do also some poetry-based stuff as well. I want you now to think about an uncomfortable topic or an uncomfortable situation related to some aspect of life that you can communicate to your students through drama, or they can communicate through drama, that is relevant to their progression, to their life, to their future, okay? And please try to be as uncomfortable as you can. And I'm just going to give you 5 minutes in maybe groups of 5 or 4 or whatever you feel comfortable with to think about something uncomfortable and how you would act it out. So in 5 minutes, this is more of an improvisation than a drama. You all look a bit depressed now. It can also be something happy, uncomfortable, right? Like, I don't know, the reining in of a horse as a king or something. Okay, so I'm just going to give you, it's now 12:42. I'm going to give you exactly 5 minutes. You can get into groups of 3 if you want, if it's easier. And I want you then to stand up and act something out. It doesn't have to be the direct thing. You can hide it. So you can dramatize something and leave the audience to kind of think about what it means to them. Okay? Yeah, you have to ask. Okay, so 5 minutes. Okay, which group would like to come up first? Please come up. Come on. Oh, well, okay. I'll give you the mic. As Robin is dramatizing this idea, I'm going to write, and I'd encourage you also to think what the takeaways for students are in terms of conceptual learning.
Yeah, the most uncomfortable experience I ever had is to see students kissing in my classroom. So 2 students sit at the back row, and they thought that teachers won't see them.
You're supposed to dramatize this, so do you want to get somebody to kiss?
No, not today. Can you? Send a picture to your husband. That's fine. Come on. Okay. All right. Anyway, so they thought that we can see that, but when you are on the stage, you actually saw everything, right? So they're happy. I'm not happy. So that's the most uncomfortable experience I ever had.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. You're going to presumably something out, correct? Okay. So yeah. Okay. Is it on? Rob, right?
Saying is I'm writing.
Does it work? Do you want to
hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I remember your name is Mike.
My name is Mike. I'm arriving in Bangkok for the first time in a long time, and I'm meeting my friend, the professor. This is what happened. Professor, it is so good to see you all. Again. Professor, it's so good to see you. Oh my God. That's it. I guess we could talk about talking.
Okay, for Thai people, normally we when we see each other for the first time, we will say why, like as always, if you go over there and in another country. But if you take like give or hug, this is not unwanted welcome. We feel not comfortable. But for me, when we are international person like that, we understand about the global perspective and also some of the the culture that we know what you mean.
But if the first time, you will not be able to do like that because this is make uncomfortable for many people. Okay, this is thank you very much.
I went to Bangkok to try and make arrangements and negotiate for a business school to do things together. And I got off on a very wrong path, on a very wrong foot. I didn't understand enough about the culture to behave appropriately.
No, I think we need two people. Come on, come on. And we need the chair. And we need somebody. Yes. Can we have one of you masseuse? Are you going to be the masseuse, Mary Jo? Okay, it's okay. Do you want to take? Okay, so just watch this one and watch over here as well.
Nobody know you have a business. Good. First of all, I would like to really express my deep and warm gratitude to the women for doing the massage a while ago. But that massage will cost me a divorce. Because my colleague there took a picture of it, and she's going to use proceed to the deep fake, changing the context and sending it to my wife, saying that I was in the salon. We were, you know, in Senegal, 2 years back, we experienced a situation involving a professional woman working in a massage salon and a political leader. And the political leader was accused of rape by the woman. The whole country was divided. People sided with the women, and the other is a politician, saying that, oh, the actual regime is just using it as an excuse to eliminate potential opponent, its serious opponent for this election. Happened. Yes, and this cost us something like 3 weeks of upheaval in Senegal. Many people died. And you see, today, I'm facing the same situation, and maybe my life, my school, my students, very important to say that, okay, I sent you for a mission, and you go, you know, to a salary. Oh, what I'm going to do. This is deep fake.
Thank you. Does anybody remember when one of the biggest charities in the world went to Haiti, and they used Oxfam's money, public donations, to have a drug alcohol-infused party and hired local prostitutes? I don't know if anyone remembers that story. And this is something I teach in class, like, what, Oxfam, a charity actually does that? Like, oh, they're people. Of course. So these stories are a reality. Can we have one last group? Anyone want to? Come on. Come on, deans. The deans have to steal the show. And then it suits. Okay.
So this is based on real facts. Well, yeah.
Oh, you don't need one.
The situation is when a staff member that is not performing very well paid, very good process, and after a lot of signals, I called him to my office to have a very frank conversation, and what it was a half an hour of me dramatizing Why you don't do the job? Why the time plan is not there? I mean, we are calling you all the time. We are offering all the help that you need. We have our donors that are asking us A, B, and C, but you are not doing anything, and you're not answering those emails. You don't report what is the problem. So can you tell us something? And on the other side, the guy that is an engineer, very well trained, have been working in corporate, he was sitting like my friend. Yes. And the couple was during a half an hour. He's acting corporate. And so I didn't know what to do. It has been one of the most difficult ideas.
So what was the reason?
Well, what I ended up, because I had a lot of trips, so I did something I have never done in my life, and I hope I will not do again. So I asked this fellow to report to me every single day.
Oh my
God.
Micromanaging.
Absolutely. Thank you for the other.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Just as a final thought about drama-based learning, you can also get your students to dramatize something by themselves. So talking to somebody else that's not even there. So, and that gives them the opportunity to get out something. So for example, let's just say that we're in Egypt in a local restaurant and there's stray animals and I'm the manager and I'm talking to my employee and I say, listen, why are these animals here? Our customers don't like them. Go and get some rat poison and just put it down. We need to get rid of them. Then you get the same student to speak to the manager back and say, well, no, like, I can't do that. That doesn't go against, it goes against my value system. It's not something that I feel comfortable with. And so when you get a student to play these two roles as well, it gets them out of their shell to think about, can I be one person with different value systems in different places and different situations? And of course we can. Unfortunately, as humans, our value system can tend to meander in different places. And it also gets them to think about what position they might take as well. And now, we're talking a lot about empathy and emotional intelligence and value-based character building. So this is another way that, drama can help students to kind of get out of their shell a little bit. I think that's it. I hope it was useful. I know there was a lot of stuff in there. If anyone would like to donate or volunteer to help my doggies, please do, and I also do work with orphans as well. So yes, I hope you enjoyed that, and